them that I had several colleagues who work with me in D.C. who I feel comfortable can stand in for me and deliver the same information that they were interested in. So I recommended two people. They selected the sister over the brother, which I knew they would do. And then I prepped the sister for the interview and said, well, when you talk to them, don't be too African. You know, say Egypt instead of Kemetic, because they're not gonna air Kemetic, right? So you have to know who you're dealing with. And so she she went in, she did the interview, and then they asked her to do it again. They taped it, then they asked her to do it again and leave out, you know, don't say Aset, say ISIS. Don't say Kim, say Egypt. So she did it again, and she was so frustrated. I said, well, baby, I mean, you got to understand, this is who you're dealing with. And if you want to get your foot in the door, you have to speak their language. You have to speak their language and work through them in order to get access to other people. That's the way the game is now. Hopefully that's not how it's always going to be, but that's how the game is now, right? So until we get our own television stations, and I'm not talking about BET, BET never was ours, even when it was black controlled. So we have to begin to use other technologies, the internet, YouTube. That's free. What we have to begin to do is to produce some quality information. Brother, you mentioned that, Tyrone, you mentioned that you're doing some stuff in the media. We need to get some professional people who understand the media to produce some short clips, because people have a very short attention span. So if you want to create something that's going to appeal to young folk, it should be no more than 10 to 15 minutes. And you hit your major points, not too deep, superficial information, not superficial information, surface information that hits on relevant points so that you can get their interest and then direct them to something that is more substantive. But you have to be able to reach the basic audience, and you got to use the technology. You got everything you need to change the consciousness of millions of people. You just have to begin to use the technology strategically. All right? Anybody else have a question? Yes, sir. All right. Anybody ever tell you you look like Chuck D?
I did. I told her that earlier.
I've been hearing that all day. All right, public enemy in the house.
Like the house.
My question is to the chronology of Kemetic. Now, I see that most people, including you in your presentation, you use the chronology that European people have put together for us, which is 3100, 3200 BC. My question is, when are we going to start to analyze the information ourselves and put together our own chronology and use it in our presentations and stop letting other people define when our period ends and begins? Even the dynasty periods comes from Matthew. This is something that has been addressed by Robin Walker in his book When We Rule. He pushes the chronology back to 5600 BC. Also, John Anthony West in Serpent in the Sky pushes it to 4200 BC. I just want to know, when are we going to start assessing our own information and presenting it to our own people in our own way, so that letting other people delegate to us how we're supposed to categorize our ancestors in a historical basis?
Right, true. All right, good. That's a good question. And answer that question based on understanding your audience and understanding the environment in which you're working. What I'm interested in is getting my information into classrooms. Right? Of the 6 books that I've written, along with the 2 with my daughter, I'm really pleased to say that all of my information are in elementary schools, high schools, and colleges throughout the United States, in the Caribbean, in Japan, certain parts of Africa. And so I know who the audience is that I want to appeal to. So understanding the audience and where they are, I got to appeal to that audience. And so, which means that if you're presenting the history and you want it to be accepted within the classroom, you want it to be accepted within certain educational structures, then you got to work within certain frameworks. I understand that. Now, behind closed doors and private conversations with folk, I'll tell them that, yes, I believe the time frame is older than that. I believe it's older than that, but where I am right now, what my mission is right now, I've got to deal with where the majority of people are. And so I go with the traditional timeline, the short timeline. I know it's short. And once I begin to interest people in the information, then I can tell them that this is the timeline that they have settled on. I don't think it's accurate, but this is what we're using right now for the sake of clarity. right? The other issue is, and this is a reality, is that a lot of people, because of the fact that we've been brainwashed for so long and lied to for so long, a lot of us are strangers to the truth. And when they hear the truth, they become frightened by it. The main reason, and I referenced this in Nile Valley Contributions, I use the standard timeline, but in the chapter of the book, I talked about the reason why that standard timeline was adopted was because of a German Egyptologist who was aware of the earlier timelines, but he was also a staunch Christian. He was a Christian and believed, according to his interpretation of the Bible, that God created the world September the 21st in 4004. So how can the chronology of Egypt be thousands of years older than that? So he intentionally pushed it back to a later time frame. So I put that information out there as I explain why I'm using this timeline. So people have to be able to synthesize the knowledge that you're sharing and come to certain conclusions for themselves. You can't always tell people everything. You lay out the facts, and then you have to trust people to be able to analyze the facts and come to their own conclusions, and then seek out additional information when they're ready. So that's how we're dealing with things right now. John Anthony West, I like what West is doing. I like what Robin Walker has done. And to be perfectly honest with you, we don't know what the proper timeline is, time frame. We don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if 50 years from now, there are other timelines that are put forth that are proven valid. So we're working with what we have right now and trying to build on this with the knowledge that everything that we know now is going to change. If we're honest with ourselves, nobody has all the answers. And as you gather new information, you change your mind. It doesn't mean that everything that you knew prior to that point is false. Everything changes, everything evolves. That's life. And so you live life to win this game. Okay?
Also, one other point I just want to make quickly. The book that you mentioned, Black Genesis, there's also a book, one of the co-authors of Black Genesis, Thomas Brophy, the astrophysicist. No, he's an astrophysicist. About naphtha fire. He also, in his
the calendar.
the origin map.
Yeah, I'm reading that.
The origin map. He also says that it's the great year, also too.
The
great year. So I just wanted to put that out there that we had that before.
Sure.
The minds had it.
But and most folks don't know what you're talking about when you say that. All right. See, and part of the thing we're standing on the precipice of a profound shift in consciousness. Yes, sir. We're standing on the verge of a profound shift in consciousness, and the things that we have believed all of our lives are about to change. Now, let's be aware of the fact that when that happens, a lot of folk won't be able to make that change because they can't conceive of anything outside of what they have been taught to believe in. There's a psychological term for that, and that's scotoma, right? Scotoma. What you believe makes you feel good. It makes you comfortable. And when someone presents information that conflicts with what you believe, what your mama taught you, your preacher taught you, your husband taught you, your wife taught you, or someone that you love and respect, when somebody presents you with the information that conflicts with what you've been taught, then it sets up a psychological dilemma. And so you automatically shut down so that you aren't uncomfortable with that information. So that's real. That's a part of the human condition. So as we talk to people, we have to understand that, and we have to learn to respect people where they are. Respect people where they are. Everybody has the right to believe what they want to believe. And I don't have the right to tell you you're wrong and I'm right. I don't have that right. I'll share with you what I know. I'll present my evidence to validate what I believe to be the truth, and you can either accept it or reject it. Doesn't matter to me. This is what I know. And if you choose to believe it, if you choose to use this information or study this information and it's helpful to you, fine. If you choose to ignore it, fine. It's your call. Okay? Yes, sir.
The difference between the reaction in Libya and Egypt, Gaddafi and Mubarak.
The difference between the military response in Egypt and Libya. As I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this during the lecture or during the break, but when I was in Senegal in December, Gaddafi was there, so I had a chance to see him. He gave a major address, and at the symposium where we were speaking, Gaddafi's people were circulating in the audience. They were seeking out all of the African-centered scholars and extending us invitations to come to Libya to participate in a forum that they were having in January. So, I mean, there was a debate. Renoko came up to me and said, Tony, man, you know, this Libyan guy comes to me and he's asking me if I'm interested in coming to Libya and to give him a list of other people. What do you think? I said, well, you know, I was talking with Professor Poe, who teaches at Lincoln, and he's been to Libya twice to do presentations. And he's telling me good things about how receptive folk are, and you know, they cover all your experience, just like we were treated well. We were treated like kings when we went to Senegal. You know, they flew. Saying when he went to Libya, they did the same thing. We don't get this treatment very often. You know, we're looked down upon by some of our own people for talking this African stuff. But Professor Poe was saying, put our names on the list, and we talked to the brother who was compiling the list, and he said that he would get back with us, and none of us ever heard from him. So I assumed this conflict probably put an end to that for the time being. But the reality was, I was talking with someone back at home about, I think I was talking to my wife, about this unrest in Libya. And I said, well, you know, while America is painting Gaddafi as a bad guy, the reality is if the same thing was happening right here, the President of the United States, whether it was Barack Obama or George Bush, would send the troops out into the street. They did that in the 60s. You all know about Kent State and killing white folk. They killed black folk. They would do the same thing right here, because the government is run by big business. Government is run by big business, and they're always interested in protecting their interests. And so I can't, on one hand, I can't fault Gaddafi for doing what he feels is necessary to stay in business, stay in government. It may not be what I do, but I understand why he's doing what he's doing. I understand why Mubarak was reluctant to leave. And what was interesting, as I mentioned, I had an Egyptian colleague was over at the house, and that Thursday evening was when everybody expected Mubarak to resign, right? And Mubarak said, I ain't going nowhere. Y'all ain't putting me out. So I said to him that evening that, you know what's going to happen now? They're going to send in the jackals. Have you all ever read John Perkins' Confessions of an Economic Hitman? When a leader refused to play by the rules, they send in the jackals, the assassins. They will either shoot him and take him out, or he'll have a heart attack or a stroke. And so Friday morning, Mubarak is gone. They said that he's had a stroke or a heart attack, and no one has heard from him since. You don't know where he is. And more than likely, somebody either put something in his drink or gave him an injection or something, neutralized him, so that they can move forward with their agenda. And the show will go on without Mubarak. Now, what that show is, I don't know. But, you know, one of the issues is that we have to begin to look at is that the powerful people who control this country and control the world are few in numbers. And they exist because the masses support them in our foolishness. Can you imagine how the direction of this country would change if we decided that we're not going to buy gas-guzzling automobiles anymore, or if we're not going to buy Exxon gas? Can you imagine how we can change the direction of this country if just black folks said, until we get the justice that we know we deserve? It's 20 years after the beating of Rodney King, and there was a similar beating of a young black man in Houston, Texas just recently. Why is it that we are the only ones who get beaten and killed by cops regularly? And we see mothers on television crying crocodile tears, but it's always us. Can you imagine what would happen in this country if black folks said we will no longer celebrate Christmas? We will no longer buy Christmas presents until this nation does the right thing with black folk. If we took that one stand, we would be free by New Year's. But we can't do it. Most folk are afraid, most people are lazy, most people don't believe that it can be done, so we do nothing. And as a consequence, the people who hold all the power continue to hold the power. So until enough people are courageous enough or motivated enough to work strategically for our collective best interest, we aren't going to see any meaningful change in this country in our lifetime. Let me get the brother and then the sister.
Yes, I just said basically about the African way for us to make the first move. My opinion, I think we're going to have a long wait. Because just like you said, we don't, a lot of us that aren't conscious do not want to become conscious or know what's going on. Because it's easier to be a slave and comfortable than be out in the street and cold. So the thing what I'm saying is, I feel like the African Union is great and they're waiting for us, because we had to they're motivated by us. But that's a long wait, because what I've seen, a lot of them do not want to come out of that mentality of slavery.
All right. I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I think there's another option that we need to look at. And that is, if we're honest with ourselves, the changes that have happened in the course of history that have affected the majority of people in history were initiated by a small handful of folk.
But that, when I don't see that even for you.
No, listen to me now. And there are always circumstances beyond our control that set other things in motion. Now, if we're honest with ourselves, regardless as to what the teabaggers and the other right-wingers say, global warming is real. And we, collective we, have so screwed up the environment that I guarantee you we're going to see some profound changes in the environment within the next 10 years that's going to force us to start doing things differently. You're going to have hotter summers. The price of oil is going to skyrocket. We're going to be forced to make some changes, and not everybody is going to be able to make those changes. Right? And so what history shows us, one of the beautiful reasons of studying history is that history shows you what has happened in the world over time, regardless as to whether or not people were ready for what is going to happen. And so given where we are, we can expect within the next 10 years, we can expect to see wholesale deaths of people in this country. We can expect to see that, either from disease or man-made catastrophes or natural catastrophes. You look at what happened in Japan yesterday, right? A lot of that can be attributed to the change in weather patterns that were brought about by us not respecting this planet. And so the earth is going to protect itself, and if it means destroying us to protect itself, that's going to happen. I want you to also note the spate of movies that have come out over the last couple of years. I Am Legend, The Road, The Book of Eli. These movies with these things, they have one common thing. Some disaster, which they never describe, but some disaster wiped out a substantial portion of the population. And you see people trying to make it. Now, these movies don't just happen by happenstance. Part of the reasons why you see certain themes in movies is people preparing you for what is coming down the pipe. And my advice is that people need to begin to start preparing themselves for disaster. And nobody wants to think about that, but the reality is, given where things are, something is going to happen. And if you believe in karma, if you believe in ma'at, if you believe in reciprocity, then whatever it is that's going to happen is going to happen and continue happening for a long time. History is always written by the survivors of catastrophes. Always written by the survivors of catastrophes. And the survivors are usually a small handful of people who were in tune to what was happening. They're in tune to God, the Creator, whatever term you want to use, in tune to nature. And so they were in the right place at the right time to be spared. And they knew how to survive the difficult times in order for humanity to replenish itself. You see that pattern happening over and over again throughout history. So why are things going to be different on our watch just because we're here? Please, we're not that important. We really aren't that important in the overall scheme of things. So if you want to look at making a contribution to humanity, look at what you can do to make this world a better place. How can we stop consuming less? If there were, just think about this, for example. If there was a disaster that was either brought on by an earthquake or a tornado or a storm, and crops were wiped out. You know, a large percentage, over 40% of our food comes from California. Now that doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense to rely on the West Coast, which is in danger of being destroyed by an earthquake. You know, they're predicting the big one is coming. They don't know when, but they know it's coming. So why would you depend on a region of the country that may probably be destroyed to supply you with food? Why aren't you developing other areas of the country where you could get food? So let's just say hypothetically, if a major supplier of food is no longer available, where are you going to get your food? How many of you all know how to grow food? How many of you all have space to grow food? How many of you all can survive on, what, a meal every 2 days? If gasoline is no longer available, how many of you all can walk 10 miles to get to food? I mean, these are things that we need to start thinking about. What are you doing now to prepare yourself for the bad times? And if the bad times never come, then at least you're in good physical shape. You know, and that's a good thing. But it's about being prepared. It's about being prepared. And the idea of being prepared frightens a lot of people. But you have to get over your fear. You have to get over your fear. And you conquer your fear through knowledge. You conquer your fear through preparation. Right? And as Dick Gregory says, fear is the absence of God. Sister, you had a question?
Yeah, you conquer your fear through love and service. But the question I had was, I didn't get, because I just didn't hear, I just couldn't get it, what the Chinese brothers thing was. You know, they were asking about how he prepared the masses for revolution.
Oh, sure.
I just couldn't get it. And then I also wanted to ask you, after you answer that, sometimes we show what we think are positive images in the African community, and they turn out to be some of the most destructive people to our people. So sometimes those so-called positive images, again, the brother was talking about that in the clip, they're not serving this season. But I want to hear what he was saying.
Sure. Well, what Mr. Yet was talking about was the writer said that to help transform the consciousness of people, to show the distinctions between the oppressor and the oppressed, then you never show the oppressed people in an unfavorable light. You never. The oppressed people are clothed like, what was that line that Stevie Wonder, living for the people, living for the city? My clothes are old, but never are they dirty. All right? I may not have everything, but at least I carry myself as if I have everything inside of me. Right? So that's the difference. And with regards to positive images, you got to look at the source. You got to look at the source. Everybody was so happy years ago when Bob Johnson started BET. And last year, Mr. Johnson's former wife said in a piece in, it's either Newsweek or Time magazine, that when her grandchildren come to her house, she does not allow them to watch BET. She says that she is ashamed of what they have created. So discretion is the issue. Discretion is the key. Not all black folk have the best interests of black folk at heart. And you have to ask yourself, you know, when you look at something, when you listen to somebody, I guess a good rule of thumb, and I used to do this with a lot of young folk. I do a lot of training with college students every summer down at the Alex Haley Farm. And of course, young folk are always walking around with their iPods listening to music. So what I do, I walk up to them and say, "What are you listening to?" I say, let me listen to what you. Oh no, you don't want to hear it. You don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear it. Then why are you listening to it? You know, I just have a conversation. Why are you? If you don't want me to listen to it, then why are you listening to it? How would your grandmother feel if she heard you listening to that? You know, I just make it real personal to them, and they like, the brother stuff. You know, how would my grandmother feel? And he knows what his grandmother would say if she knew that he was listening to that pornography. So I'm not telling them not to listen to it, but I'm just asking them to think about what you're listening to. Think about what you're putting into your body, what you're putting into your mind. Because whatever comes into your body stays with you. You know the expression, you are what you eat? Well, you are what you see. You are what you listen to. You are what you think. You are who you associate with. All of these things affect you on a cellular level. They change your DNA. So if you know that, and if you truly value, you know, this vessel that the Creator inhabits, then you would not subject this vessel, this precious thing, to anything. And if we love our children, we would be very careful about what we allow them to listen to and what we allow them to see, if we love them. Because it's not just a movie. It's not just a video. Because no other people allow their children to ingest that poison to the extent to which we do. Anybody else? Any question? Let me get somebody over here, and then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I was listening to you earlier, and I agree with just about everything you're saying, especially in terms of planting ideas in people's minds, positive ideas in terms of the United Africa Kingdom and so forth. And the question I have for you is, especially with Africa and their plans with us, and how we're basically to close the deal for them, is, are they part of or against you alluded to it so many times, these small group of individuals that are ruling the world? Are there going to be a de jure state or a de facto state? And I'm really curious about that in terms of you referred to it again, the jackals and so forth. I want to know if they're going to be organic.
It remains to be seen. There are many options on the table. If you consider this right now, Japanese, the Chinese, the Asians, and of course the Europeans are dug deep into Africa. Japanese and Chinese are everywhere. They're building roads, they're building dams, they're building farms. They're there helping lift these African men, women, and children out of poverty. They see them helping them. They don't see us there. So if I was in dire straits and I saw someone who was not of my community coming to help me and they were making my life better, then I would go with them simply because they're making my life better. I may not know what plans they have for me down the road, but at the moment, this is my best option to make a life for myself and my family. I'm going to go with that. We have better knowledge of how these nefarious organizations work. We have more knowledge about that than they do. So why aren't we more involved in helping them determine their destiny? You know, some of the brightest youth I've ever seen are in Africa. Some of the brightest youth I've ever seen. Young folk who want to learn, who want to go to school. They're hungry, they're thirsty. And as I saw in Senegal, I saw young folk in their 20s who were involved in the government, who were taking leadership roles, who exhibited responsibility that I don't see in most folk my age. And I was so pleased to see a government that entrusted these young people with a place in their government and prepared them so that they can rule and be conscious folk. And they want us. They want the information that we have. So what we have to begin to do is to get more of our people willing to travel to Africa and willing to help out, bring whatever skills we have. But we have to be aware of the fact that we're going to go up against multinational organizations that are in there and dug in deep. So what can we bring to the table? I mean, just think in terms of sympathy. I know some folk, I know there's a husband and wife physician team in D.C. They've been traveling to Africa for over 20 years, providing medical care. There are some engineers that I know who travel to Africa and who build wells. So they're affecting a small local community and making a difference. Everybody here can do something. And the reality is, if you can't do something in Africa, you can do something in your own community. What sense does it make to talk about doing something in Africa if you ain't doing nothing at home? Start home, build a base. Try to help some young people negotiate high school. Encourage them to be engineers and doctors and lawyers and develop other skills that they then can take elsewhere. One of the positive things that I've seen over the years are colleagues of mine who graduated from Howard University. Matter of fact, a friend of mine who was an architect graduated from Howard and went to Nigeria. And he was able to work on projects in Nigeria that he could not have worked on in the United States. I know engineers who left D.C. and went to South Africa. And while they said they're not making as much money as they would be making here in the United States, they're having a greater impact, teaching students, working with organizations and institutions, because you're working with your own folk who appreciate you and respect you. So we've got to begin to start thinking outside of the box and seeing ourselves as a global people and develop networks. And it's going to take time. I'm not being idealistic, but at least we got to get in the game and start doing something as opposed to standing on the sidelines. You got to follow through. Yes.
I have to ask this question because what you're saying touches upon this a lot. A lot of people don't know about this. And I was just curious if you know the term, if you know what uniform commercial code is in relation to everything that you speak, and if so, why, or I should say, do you talk about solutions in terms of those the maximum laws of business?
Maximum laws of business or business?
Yeah, the 10 maximum laws of business.
No, I mean, that's not my field of interest. So, no.
Because what you're saying, it coincides with everything about that, which is what the small groups of people that are ruling the world go by.
Sure.
And so that's why I had to
No, see, I'm not aware of that, but that's the whole reason why we should have these conversations. We should have these gatherings, because everybody in this room knows something that nobody else knows. Right? So you should take your expertise and share with others, share the knowledge, so that we can come together and work together on projects for our collective benefits. But I'm saying I can't Google everything, because I have to accept the fact I'll be 60 years old this year, right? And I'm accepting the fact I have more years behind me than ahead of me. I can't do everything. I don't want to do everything. I want to spend the next 10 years focused on one specific area, right? And I love to be able to network with people who have expertise in other areas so that I can come to you. If you have something that I need to come to you and trust you to provide me with the truthful information that will allow me to maximize my input in whatever I'm doing. So we have to cultivate our skills, whatever those skills are. Everybody has something that they can do. We have to start doing that thing and stop waiting on someone else to do it for you, because it's not going to happen. Yes, sir.
What you were saying about disaster preparedness, because I've been teaching disaster preparedness for 13 years under Aton Edwards. And we had an evacuation walk out of New York to show people how to get out of New York in case of emergency. And you know, out of all the texts and the email that I sent out, 5 people came.
Yeah.
And you know, I refer this brother's book because he's our brother. Preparedness Now is the book. It shows you urban survival, but we teach a workshop right up on Nicholas Bookstore every Wednesday. And the first Wednesday of the month we teach survival. So I know it's important what you're saying about disaster preparedness. I mean, I walk with my survival kit, different types all the time, different things in case of emergency. I know with this kid, I can handle myself for at least 24 to 72 hours. It's just what I have in here. But we teach how to improvise and adapt to any situation, because the more you know, the more you're able to adapt and use what you have in your given environment to help others. But remember, it's not just, you got to also give this to your family, because when you have and they don't have, they come into you to get it. Right. And it's dangerous. So I thank you very much for bringing that up.
You're welcome. And one of the reasons why I say this is because I remember when I was at Howard in the 70s, Dick Gregory used to come to Howard regularly. And he talked about these very same things.
Yes,
and he said that every person should have a Boy Scout handbook at home.
Yes,
Boy Scout manual shows you how to survive, you know, how to build a fire, how to identify poisonous plants.
Right.
You know, you need to have some basic information. Bible is cool, but you need some other texts that are going to help you. You know, provide you with some practical information, and with the hope that you never have to use it. You know, you have a spare tire in your car for a reason. You don't hope to get a blowout, but in case there's a problem, you got a spare tire.
Insurance.
So we need to start thinking about these things. Let me come back over. Let me get this brother here. Brother behind you. Yes, sir.
I just want to make two small observations of what you have said so far. Dr. Flyer not only talks about a 25,000-minute cycle, but it presumes that there's these two cycles that they had to see,
Yeah.
and the mathematics to go with it. So these Africans was conscious of their consciousness and aware of their relationship between Earth and the stars. So that presupposes that, and the mathematics to go through to figure it out, and then also lay it out in Dr. Flight. Second, universal commercial code. That's predicated on we're going to still be used by European rules and regulations, because that comes right out of Europe. And so if we're going to organize ourselves as African people, are we going to organize ourselves along their line, or are we going to organize ourselves along our line? We need to do it our line. Wayne Noble said that a person who stands on somebody else's foundation is not whole. You can only be whole when you stand on your own.
Well, look, hold on, because I don't have I got 10 more minutes before I leave. So let me say you two talk. But look, you know, let's look at certain realities. And was it? See the Sam yet? Somebody I had heard recently talk about the fact that they were traveling in Africa. Yeah, it was Sam yet. He was traveling in Africa, and he said he saw a man who looked just like his father. Looked just like his father. And he wanted to connect with him, but he didn't speak the language. And his guide on the trip was a white guy who translated what the old man said to him. And he said the reality hit him hard like a ton of bricks when he's got to go through his oppressor to interpret for somebody that could be his father. So the issue is, look, everybody in here is speaking English. We're speaking English because, you know, our forefathers were enslaved by people who spoke English. So in certain situations, we have to use whatever we have available to us in order to prepare ourselves to do what we really want to do. So I don't think it's always either or. We have to assess the situation and use what we have at our disposal to get to another point, knowing that our objective is to get back home. Whatever it takes to get back home, whatever path we have to take to get back home will be justified if we make it home safely and still have our minds intact. Right? So we got time for one more question. One more, let me get the brother in the back.
Does the film industry, Nollywood film industry, to your knowledge, do they support positive images of us?
Well, you know the answer to that question.
I really don't, because I don't watch their films a lot.
Okay. Well, what was it? And it was in January. Was it in January when they listed all of the nominees for the Oscars?